just a quick overview. So we're gonna talk a little bit how like we actually made the DeFi Saver, how like we got the idea and what was the process behind it. Then I'm going to talk a bit about like how you can actually build something similar to the DeFi Saver, maybe something better. And then we're gonna just kind of mention a bit like smart contract wallets. So the first part is kind of how we got the idea and how we got into the DeFi ecosystem at all. So it was last year. It's pretty cold in Serbia in the winter. So we decided to actually go for a month and live and work in Thailand. I say here it's a vacation. It was more of a vacation. Thailand is generally very fun. So it turned out it was like a great adventure for us, and we managed to escape the winter. There's an image of us like working really hard in Thailand. While we were working really hard, the second thing was going on in the whole internet space. That was the crypto winter. So as you all know, the price of Ether was falling pretty rapidly. But because we were having so much fun and work while traveling in Thailand, we kind of didn't really pay attention to price of Ether. So, like, to be more precise, I personally didn't pay much attention because the price of Ether was going, up pretty down. We were kind of certain that it's going to, kind of get back together at one point. So while I was at like a whole day trip without my internet, we were going to like basically a jungle in Thailand. That was basically the day that the price was starting to fall, like the peak of the fall. Once I actually like got to my phone and checked CoinMarketCap, as I always do, I saw that the price has not only like fallen really a lot, but I'm actually really close to liquidation point on my CDP. So CDP is like the MakerDAO CDP. I have taken out a loan before that, partially to fund the Thailand trip. But because I was having so much fun and we were not really thinking about price, I haven't noticed that my CDP is becoming like really close to becoming liquidated. For people not knowing, liquidation will cause you to like lose about like 50% of your money as your Ether gets liquidated or sell off, so it pays the debt. That wasn't like fun at all. There's actually a picture of me during the trip. I wasn't feeling that well about being almost liquidated. And once I got back home, I actually registered something called cdpsaver.com, because in my mind it was like the going close to liquidation. It isn't a kind of a human problem, it's a technical problem, and it should be solved. So that's kind of how I personally got the idea to create a product that's going to help users like not get liquidated. But after once we started exploring different options of how to protect users and so on, we've noticed that there's a big gap in the whole ecosystem, as a lot of money is in the CDP space, in the DeFi space in general, but there aren't a lot of like good tooling and good dashboards and management platforms to actually protect the user. The kind of main point was that me as like a Ethereum developer, like I almost got liquidated, and I'm someone who follows the price and the whole ecosystem day to day. So that was kind of a big revelation to me that, okay, a regular user, like you cannot expect them to, not go on a holiday because they have a CDP opened. After we like explored the whole DeFi space, after we learned a bit more about how the protocols work, we kind of pivoted to DeFi Saver, and we started working with other DeFi protocols as well. So the reason why I actually like told you this whole story about Thailand and me getting liquidated is because this is the first product where we actually built something where we wanted to use it. Before that, at my company, we usually build something and we hope that people will find it useful and cool. But this was the first time we actually wanted to build a product that we ourselves want to use. And I think that's kind of a big issue in the whole DeFi space, in the whole Ethereum space, is to actually build products that you have users right now that people actually need. So in my mind, I usually kind of picture 3 layers in the DeFi ecosystem. So obviously layer number 1, that's Ethereum, that's the blockchain, the kind of facility that makes smart contracts, that runs it. The second layer is actually the MakerDAO, the compound, the exchanges. Those are, I wouldn't consider them like companies. They're essentially protocols. They're unstoppable protocols built on top of smart contracts. Because of the way they're built, you can easily layer your own protocol or your own dApp on top of them. So you can kind of easily combine them and create something new. And that's kind of how DeFi Saver works in the background. Usually when people ask me and I try to explain DeFi Saver, this is probably the most kind of accurate representation, because essentially it's just kind of a puzzle of different already existing protocols. A few things that I already talked about, so what's the main difference between the regular finance and kind of this new DeFi finance? I think that the main kind of point is that these protocols are transparent, are open source, and essentially that makes them open to integration. So we didn't have to go through all the regulatory trouble. We didn't have to read some outdated docs and so on. All the second layer protocols, so all the compounds and the exchanges and so on, everything is open sourced and everything is smart contract based. So anybody, me or you, can kind of go and integrate it. That's really that's I think really a big distinction. What makes DeFi so special is it creates a playground for developers and financial people and so on to actually build something with these primitives. Just for instance, early on in the internet, kind of the media companies controlled all the kind of media, I guess. If you wanted to write something, you need to contact, the newspapers, you need to contact your television. Once the kind of personal websites and blogs came about, anybody could kind of start their own, blog or kind of their own media outlet. It's kind of similar things are happening now in DeFi. Anybody can start their lending protocol. Anybody can build on top of that lending protocol. And we really see people innovating in this space. One kind of easy way to see actually the benefit of DeFi. So for example, in DeFi Saver, we implemented a new feature called Smart Savings. It's a really simple feature. You just pick a few of the most popular lending protocols, and the user can easily lend money in those protocols and switch between them. The goal was for the users to kind of easily see where's the best place that I should put my money and then kind of easily switch between them. At my company, while we were building this, we were actually talking how would it look like if we wanted to build this in the traditional finance? And it was we didn't really know how to even start. Should we call specific banks and ask them for their APIs and their permissions? There's such a high barrier to entry, especially for us. We're mainly developers, and kind of the traditional system, the traditional finance system isn't geared towards developers. You cannot just kind of easily hack something. Everything needs to be going through some middleman or going through some regulations. Okay, so yeah, one also important thing is with the whole DeFi ecosystem, with those protocols running on Ethereum, There's not only a space to create dashboards that interact with those layers as like a view platform, but actually you can build on top of them. You can create your own smart contracts and kind of create the third layer of protocols. That kind of provides a lot of different functionalities you're not used to in like traditional finance, in traditional apps. You can bundle multiple operations, and I'll actually show you one of the examples. You can guarantee execution. If not, they will be reverted. And in general, you can kind of do a lot of things in a very simple way. It's hard to onboard users. Most users don't know about Ethereum, don't know about DeFi. But once somebody is onboarded, a lot of that complexity, a lot of that kind of financial know-how can be kind of build a layer on top of it. So yeah, I said I'm going to give you an example. So one of the like core features of DeFi Saver is the repay CDP. In its essence, if you want to if you're close to the liquidation price, you can draw some collateral, some Ether, convert it to DAI, and then repay the debt. That will obviously lift you away from the liquidation price. And that's a kind of a simple procedure. People, before DeFi Saver, people were doing this by hand, going on exchanges and doing all that. With us, we actually written, of course, a smart contract that does that for you. And as you can see, there's like 28 different contract calls. So everything you see this is once a user does a repay transaction, the user sees this. So he sees like in basically a button and an input box, and he will see what happens. But what we're actually doing behind the scene is much more complicated. So with one transaction, with like an easy-to-use interface, we're actually interacting with 28 different smart contracts. Partially because although like it was a three-step system, you can obviously kind of build on top of this and improve this very much. So for instance, you need to convert it to DAI. We created an on-chain system to find like the best price for the user. And once you repay the debt, for instance, we also buy Maker for you, so you can pay the stability fee. And we do like a bunch of small stuff that really helps the user kind of easily repay. Of course, currently it sounds great. Anybody can build anything, and it's pretty easy. All you have to know is Ethereum Solidity and everything else, which isn't that easy. Like any system, like anybody who ever programmed probably had a problem with some documentation. It's not different here. Kind of specific problems when working in DeFi and when working with DeFi as a developer are that different protocols are deployed on different testnets. So once we started integrating, for instance, different exchanges with MakerDAO, exchanges they're not on the same testnet. That gives you a lot of issues. They use different versions, let's say, of test DAI tokens. So we have all the kind of small obstacles you need to handle. Like two things I wanted to mention, like anybody who's working with Compound and MakerDAO. With Compound, there's always an issue because they have like a different level of error handling. So anybody who's like programming Solidity or working anything on Ethereum kind of fails loudly. If anything in your transaction isn't going as it's supposed to, it reverts, you'll see an error, you'll lose gas, it's kind of a bad thing. Compound is not doing that. They decided they're going to do kind of a silent error handling. So when integrating with Compound, you need kind of to take that into your mind that you need to actually handle so the transaction actually fails loudly, so you don't mess up your own other pieces of code. Anybody who's ever looked at MakerDAO's code probably knows why I said weird naming. That I think is like the biggest issue currently I have with MakerDAO. All their names in the actual code are 3 letters. Everything is kind of named very weirdly. Even after a few weeks, you never get used to it. The new version of MakerDAO, the multi-collateral MakerDAO, is even worse. So there's just going to be a lot of problems there. But yeah. Okay. Yeah. One of the things I actually wanted to kind of focus on in this talk is actually how you can monetize your DeFi app. That's something I think in this space nobody's talking about. Everybody's talking about, VCs, ICOs, getting more users, in my mind, like a good business is a business that's actually profitable. So let's see how we can actually, earn some money from the users. I highlighted here like 4 easy steps. You build an app. Our current marketing strategy is like share it on Twitter and Reddit. That's as far as we go. Then you do step number 3, and then you take the profits, right? Obviously, in this whole like algorithm, step number 3 is kind of a problem here, right? So we have our best analysts. You may recognize this guy from BitConnect. Those are kind of the people looking for, better business models. But what we learned in DeFi Saver by trying to actually monetize with users is that users in Ethereum and in DeFi in general are willing to pay you some money if you provide a service that either saves them time, saves them money. And the third one is if they trust you. I think that's kind of a requirement, especially in DeFi. People are dealing with money, trust is kind of needed. As a dashboard, as a platform, you have a lot of responsibility to the user because you can kind of easily create problems with them and actually they will lose their money. So yeah, make sure that you provide something that will either make their life easier or make them kind of earn extra cash. So I highlighted a few ways that you can monetize currently in DeFi. We opted out in DeFi Saver. We opted out for the first fee-based model. So I mentioned repay. People pay 25 basis points on each repay transaction, and we actually had 0 pushback once we introduced that fee. Because in general, we are saving people their time and their money. We're providing kind of a advanced feature that they couldn't get on other platforms. So people are actually willing to pay a little bit of money to kind of support us going further. There's obviously a bunch of other business models that we already know in Web 2.0. The subscription model isn't something I actually saw anywhere in DeFi. Technically, it's possible. We're kind of thinking about maybe even doing something like that. I think more and more dApps are going to kind of introduce a monthly level subscription model, and that would be good for the whole ecosystem. The third one is premium features. With Ethereum, it's actually, you can kind of create new things a user that has a certain NFT token can unlock some extra features on your dApp. You can kind of create a whole kind of gamification, kind of a small economy about that. Somebody can maybe sell that premium feature to someone else and so on. The fourth one is kind of coming from the DeFi ecosystem itself. There's a thing called, if you heard RDAI, where you can actually share your interest earning on your DAI. So that's also an interesting model. And for the last one, I said token models. It's a really generalized term. I mean ICOs, any sort of where you create some token and you try to sell it and create kind of a model around that. For me personally, I'm not too interested in the token models. I think kind of the ICO stage ruined that for us. But the fees and the premium features, I think, are kind of an interesting thing going forward. Yeah. So one thing I also hear a lot about people is once you try to monetize on your smart contracts on your dApp, because by definition smart contracts are open source, they're transparent. There's really no they're easily copyable. You can take source code from Etherscan and deploy it, remove the fee, and then users will jump to your platform. In my opinion, that's really not the case. Like I said before here, like they trust you. I think trust is a big thing, and if somebody goes and copies your code and kind of copies your whole platform and removes the fees, like what's stopping them to kind of introduce a backdoor? What's stopping them to try and hack the users? So in general, I don't think like legitimate companies or legitimate individuals would actually like copy other people's code and try to kind of undermine them. And users will not trust other people who are like undermining legit companies. So that's kind of just my opinion. You can see even in this picture that the two cats are not the same. So there's always going to be a difference, even though like generally they're both cats. Yeah. So the second big thing I want to talk beside like monetizing is not losing people's money. That's one of the things we kind of figured out really early on with DeFi Saver, that people generally don't like if you lose their money. For like a weird reason, that's like a big no-no. And they will actively try to lose their own money with your platform. That's also a problem. So I've written here like there's two types of problems when dealing with security. First is like try to make it so hackers cannot steal the money, and try to make it so that your own users don't lose their own money. Yeah, there's actually like a funny story. A few weeks ago, once we released the like smart savings feature, we actually shown like an address called like that's your like smart contract wallet, right? So that address was kind of shown in the right corner of the app, and the whole app was built so there's like big buttons where you can click and supply the money to the protocols and so on. One user actually like went to the app, saw the whole like interface with all the flashy buttons and everything, decided not to use that, but actually just directly send all his money to the address he saw on the screen. That wasn't good. I had to like write a contract that will draw the money and bring back to him. But in general, like people will send money to weird places. People will not use your app as intended. People will kind of try and break it. Honestly, I think most of the time, not even intentionally. Ethereum and the whole DeFi space is kind of, everything's new. Even for me as a developer, sometimes it's hard to kind of know what's going on. So I'm not blaming the users, but as a developer, as somebody who's building like an app that deals with DeFi, you really need to think about like, okay, what if the user does this like really stupid thing? Is he gonna lock his money? Are we able to bring that money back, and so on? As far as like the general security of like not getting hacked, obviously security audits are important. They're not that important in my opinion. That's kind of the thing, like you need them, but you also need a lot of other things as well. A couple of things that I look at when I'm like looking at a new DeFi protocol, at a new dApp, is how long do they actually spend on developing it. If you develop something in like a week, there's a lot of chance that you missed something. If there are no tests, if the code isn't commented, if people who are working on those apps have not worked on like similar things as well, those are all like red flags in my mind that you should kind of be careful on. The last thing I would say about like security is reuse already existing code. I think this is really important, as there's so many like Open Zeppelin and the MakerDAO people and so on. A lot of people are actually like building and creating contracts that are well audited, well tested, and don't reinvent the wheel. Try and kind of integrate with them. So that kind of brings us to my third point, and those are like smart contract wallets. So you probably noticed, like if you're following the whole Ethereum space, you've noticed that a lot of smart contract wallets are kind of on the rise now. We have Argent, we have Gnosis Safe, we have a couple of other ones. People are kind of realizing that, remembering your private key and the whole way to manage your keys isn't really kind of usable for the regular person. I personally have lost like my PIN, like my credit card and my PIN number a couple of times. So expecting the average user to actually know how and manage private keys and like not have limits set and so on can be really dangerous. I actually wanted to talk a little about like something we're using in DeFi Saver. Well, not actually we, but like the MakerDAO people are using something called DeFi Proxy. So most people like don't know that when you open up a CDP, you're not actually a owner of that CDP. A smart contract called DeFi Proxy is the owner, and you're the owner of that DeFi Proxy. So why did the maker people actually kind of took this approach instead of actually owning directly to your wallet? Is because the whole like maker system is actually pretty complicated. Even if you just like withdraw Ether from your CDP, there's a couple of like that Ether needs to be wrapped, that wrapped Ether needs to get pulled, that pulled Ether needs to go to this and that. So there's a lot of like processes. Before they used the DeFi Proxy approach for like basic operations with CDP, you would need to make a couple of transactions and you would need to understand like what's going on there, and that was like really complicated for the user. With the DeFi Proxy, they actually like managed to bundle those transactions into one transaction, and that was the approach we opted out in DeFi Saver. And it turns out that that was kind of the right way, as we were able to build like a lot of complex features by utilizing DeFi Proxy. And yeah, kind of not only we were able to create complex features, but in the whole like DeFi Saver, we're actually not holding any user funds on our wallet. And from the security aspects I was just talking about, this is really important. We're like a small company, we can't afford that many audits, we can't afford kind of the whole security team around us. So by reusing DeFi Proxy, by not holding money on our contracts, we're kind of limiting a lot of kind of the hacker liability, a lot of the security issues. We're kind of just delegating to MakerDAO, and they created DeFi Proxy very well. So that's the kind of bringing back to reusing other people's code. Try as much as possible, especially early on, to not handle user money like directly. Try and kind of create a layer of separation there. DeFi Proxy is like really powerful because you can actually extend it. So in its core, it's a simple 100-line contract, but you can always write other contracts that the DeFi Proxy is actually going to call. In general, I think that's kind of the right approach. So the last thing I wanted to just mention about the smart contract wallets. In general, not only are they kind of easier for users and can kind of automate a lot of stuff, we recently published a feature called like automatic repay and boost. So if you have a CDP and if you're going to Thailand and if you're not looking at the price, now we built a system that will kind of that will keep your CDP at a certain ratio. So you can do whatever, you don't have to kind of monitor it all the time, and we can kind of handle that. So the way we actually managed to handle that in a kind of transparent and in a way where we actually don't own your CDP, that was kind of a big point. We don't want to like own your CDP, and we don't want to kind of have that pressure that we can lose it or we can do something bad with it. With something like DeFi Proxy with a smart contract wallet, the user just assigns like an authority to us. So the user doesn't give us a CDP, it gives us a right to call a certain function. And that's kind of a really important because if you're in DeFi space, you'll notice that people are generally like really worried about security, they're worried about losing their money, and that's kind of expected. So you need to provide kind of solutions that kind of mitigate the amount of attacks that are possible on your platform. With this approach, like we didn't have any problems. We never got hacked, never lost anybody's money. Even if our contracts had some like minor issues, at worst you write it in a way that it just reverts. So if it reverts, it kind of clears the state, brings money back to the user. So we never had any problem with this approach, like security or usability wise. Yeah, so I probably rushed through the presentation. You can kind of follow us on Twitter. We're like most active there. You can hit me up and send me an email. Obviously, if you have any questions about basically anything DeFi related, I'm more than happy to answer. So, any questions? Okay, yeah. That's it, yeah, from the presentation. Oh, one.
Just one.
Yeah, use the mic, yeah.
Thanks very much for the presentation. You spoke about the importance of monetization, and you explained a few ways to achieve that on a dApp level. What about layer 2 protocols?
Okay.
How easy it is to monetize those?
Yeah, so I'm not like completely sure. I actually think it's pretty easy to monetize, as I do think like currently, if I'm hoping that everybody's like familiar with Compound. So it's a lending platform. You earn interest on your DAI. I don't think like if Compound added like a 0.5% of interest goes directly to them to found Compound development. I don't think people would generally mind. I feel like most protocols are just trying to kind of gather more users. Most of them are like VC or ICO funded, so the kind of monetization level isn't their main concern right now. But I would say in the future that's definitely kind of a big issue. Like a lot of those companies have like a lot of developers, a lot of kind of costs to building them. So in my mind, I actually don't think that it's a big problem because they provide a lot of value. Like a bigger problem, I would say, is for dApps that don't integrate on smart contract level, dApps that are just like interfaces. Those I think are a little bit of a problem because, like, would you pay a nice interface like 0.5% of your interest if it's only nice, like if it doesn't bring you any other value? Maybe, maybe not. Like obviously, if you build like a really nice and a good UI interface, that would bring value to the user. So yeah, hopefully in like a few years, a lot more of dApps will try and monetize, and we kind of see how everything reacts to it.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So can you just pass the mic on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we need for like recording.
Oh,
Yeah.
Cool.
Hello. All right. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I was wondering, what is currently your main sort of user drop-off point in the funnel, and what's your main bottleneck in user acquisition?
So we actually don't like track the user that much. That was kind of a big debate going on in the company. Like how much do we actually want to track the user? You never really want to like connect the user's like identity in the real world with their Ethereum address. You kind of want to keep that pseudo-anonymity going on. So we don't like detailedly track what's going on. Most of our users are actually people who already have crypto. So there's not like a huge drop off if like they don't have a wallet, if they don't have like, if like most of our users are already people who are in the crypto space. So that kind of helped us a lot to kind of actually onboard users. We actually, one of the like big features we had, for instance, especially early on, like InstaDepp was our like big competition and so on. A lot of people like started using us because with InstaDepp you actually needed to like migrate to their system. With us, because we used the same like DS proxy that MakerDAO uses, you can manage our CDPs, actually MakerDAO CDPs on our platform, on their platform, like simultaneously. You don't have to like opt out, like and just be in our platform. So that was kind of the also like one big point, is try and keep like the interoperability going on. But I have heard of like different projects that are most like that are more like regular user facing, that a lot of non-crypto people will like click on and see what's up. They have like I think like a 90-95% dropout as soon as they see like a MetaMask, you know, like whatever, you know. If you need like a crypto wallet, it's like, oh, exit. So yeah, it is a problem. Like if your app is like trying to gather non-crypto users, you'll see like a rapid drop off. There's like Formatic and there's companies like trying to work on that issue, but currently there's like a huge drop off there.
Thanks. And one following question: if you compare DeFi Saver and InstaDApp,
Yeah.
what are the two main things that you differ in what you optimize for?
Yeah, I think currently they're like pretty similar. In general, I think like as the DeFi ecosystem evolves and it gets bigger and bigger, like most of like there's like Zerion, there's InstaDepp, there's us, there's a few other apps. Generally, everybody's kind of gonna cover on like their own user base, their own market. Currently, I would say it's like pretty similar. We're maybe trying to opt out more to kind of handle more advanced use cases, kind of handle users that actually. I don't think like the big problem is like UI and UX. People generally, I think, like are not, you know, they can kind of figure it out quickly. A lot of people are actually looking for where I can find the best lending rate, how I can manage my CDP the best, like what are some like advanced trading options I can do with them. And we were kind of going more and more to that route, to actually users that know what they're doing, users that are already in crypto and want to kind of up their like ways to manage and ways to kind of interact with protocols. That's currently, I guess, our kind of the direction we're going. I feel like other platforms like InstaDepp and Zerion are maybe going in that other direction, where like they really try to like kind of make it everything simple and kind of create that for the user.
Thank you.
Thanks. So yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Yeah, we can maybe talk later if anybody has any questions.